What would you say if a cop asked, "Mind if I take a quick look in your car?" Right now? If your answer is sure, you may have just handed away your strongest protection. One polite word can turn a simple stop into a full search, a long delay, and charges you never saw coming. Hit subscribe right now because what I'm about to show you could save you in a real traffic stop. Like this video before you forget, because panic hits fast when those lights flash behind you. The phrase that can save you is simple, calm, and easy to remember. "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." That's it. Short, clean, no anger, no arguing, no drama. But this video is bigger than one sentence because if you say the right words at the wrong time or the wrong tone or after you already gave permission, you can still end up in trouble. I'm going to show you when to say it, how to say it, what to say next, and what not to do after you say it. I've analyzed over 200 body cam videos, and the pattern is always the same. Drivers talk too much, agree too fast, and don't even know when the stop should have ended. Here's the reality. Most stops do not blow up because someone was speeding. They blow up because the driver starts helping the officer build a case. You think you're being polite? You think you're calming things down? You think saying sure makes you look innocent? But all it does is remove a barrier that was protecting you. This comes straight from Supreme Court rulings. Once you understand the rules, you stop handing over rights for free. By the end of this video, you'll know the exact phrase that blocks consent searches, the follow-up question that tells you if you're free to go, the silence line that stops self-snitching, and the one lawful order you should obey without turning it into a bigger mess. Now let's talk about why this is so dangerous. A traffic stop feels casual. And the officer walks up, you roll the window down, they ask where you're going, where you're coming from, if you have anything illegal, if they can look in the car, if you mind stepping out, if they can check the trunk real quick. Most people have no idea that every one of those moments is a fork in the road. One path ends with a warning and you leaving. The other path ends with your car opened up, your words used against you. In a roadside fishing trip, you basically approved yourself. And here's what makes it worse. Cops are trained to make requests sound harmless. They say real quick. They say just to clear things up. They say if you've got nothing to hide. That is pressure. It may sound friendly, but it puts you in a trap. If you say yes, you made their job easy. If you stay calm and say the right line, you force them to use real legal reasons instead of your permission. Let me show you exactly how the first tactic works, because this is the line that changes everything. The first tactic is refusing the search without sounding hostile. Here's exactly what you say. "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." Word for word. Memorize that line, not "I'd rather you didn't," not "Do you have to," not "I guess that's okay." You want a clear no, a clean no, a respectful no. Defense attorneys use this exact line in court because it leaves almost no room for confusion later. If your body cam gets played in front of a judge, that sentence matters. Why does it work? Because consent is a giant shortcut for police. If you give permission, they may not need a warrant. They may not need stronger proof. In Schneckloth versus Bustamante, the Supreme Court said a search can count as valid if consent was voluntary, even if the person did not know they had a right to refuse. In plain English, that means you do not get saved by saying, "I didn't know I could say no." The court may still treat your sure like real permission. That is why your no has to be spoken out loud. Bad way. Most drivers say, "Yeah, go ahead, I've got nothing to hide." Then the officer gets consent, searches everything, and finds something you forgot was even there. Good way. Smart drivers say, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." Then the officer has to rely on some other legal reason instead of your permission. Now, let me be crystal clear. This line does not guarantee the officer won't search anyway. If they claim they smell drugs, see contraband, or say they have probable cause, they may still search. But your job is not to win a law school debate on the shoulder of the road. Your job is to protect the record. You're making it clear that any search is not by your choice. That matters later. Legal experts agree this is your strongest protection because it stops the officer from saying you happily agreed. Watch what happens when people get this wrong. They laugh nervously. They say, "You can check, officer, I'm clean." Then the officer starts opening bags, lifting seats, checking compartments, and the driver suddenly wants to take it back. Too late. Consent already opened the door. Here's the reality. Your rights are strongest before you say yes, not after. And this is 100% legal. You are allowed to refuse consent. You're not required to help officers search your own property. One more thing. Refusing consent does not mean resisting. You do not slap hands away. You do not block doors. You do not argue with your body. You stay still. You keep your hands visible. You repeat the line if needed. "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." Calm voice. No sarcasm. No attitude. Former police officers have confirmed this works because it keeps the stop from turning into a shouting match while still protecting your position. Have you ever been asked for consent during a stop like this? Drop a comment below and tell me if you knew you could say no. The The second tactic is the follow-up question that tells you whether the stop is still legal or just dragging on. You look at the officer and say this: "Am I being detained or am I free to leave?" Those exact words. Not at the first second of the stop, when they still need your license and registration. Not while they are writing the ticket. You use this when the reason for the stop seems finished, but the officer keeps fishing. Maybe your documents are back in your hand. Maybe the warning is done. Maybe they're suddenly asking about drugs, cash, or weapons for no clear reason. That is your moment. Here's the trick they don't want you knowing. A traffic stop is supposed to be about the traffic issue. Broken taillight, speeding, expired tag, whatever got you pulled over. In Rodriguez versus United States, the Supreme Court said, police cannot extend a completed traffic stop just to do extra investigation, like a dog sniff, unless they have separate reasonable suspicion. Plain English, once the mission of the stop is done, they do not get extra time just because they feel curious. Bad way. Most drivers say, "Yeah, I can stay. I don't mind. Ask whatever you need." Then the stop keeps going, more questions come, backup shows up, and the whole thing gets worse. Good way. Smart drivers say, "Am I being detained or am I free to leave?" And then the officer has to either end the stop or say they're keeping you there for a legal reason. This question works because it forces clarity. A lot of officers rely on confusion. They act like the stop is over, but keep talking in a way that makes you feel stuck. You stay because you don't want to seem rude. You answer because you think you have to, but if you're free to go, you should know that. And if you're being detained, they should be ready to own that. This is 100% legal. You are not being difficult. You are asking if the seizure is still happening. Let me show you exactly why tone matters here. You don't snap it. You don't challenge them. You say it like you're asking for directions. "Officer, am I being detained or am I free to leave?" Clean, calm, patient. If they say you are free to go, leave. Do not stay and chat. Do not ask if they're sure. Do not explain your life story. Just leave. If they say you are detained, then stop volunteering and move to the next tactic. And do not use this line to ignore lawful steps in the stop. If they ask for documents where required, you handle that. If they are still writing the ticket, you wait. This question is not magic. It is a checkpoint. It tells you if the officer is finishing the job or trying to stretch the moment into an investigation. Watch what happens when drivers ask this at the right time. The whole energy changes. Suddenly the officer has to be specific instead of vague. That's power. The third tactic is the one that stops you from talking yourself into handcuffs. Listen closely. You say, "Officer, I'm invoking my right to remain silent." If they push questions, add, "I want a lawyer." Short and direct. You're not saying this because you're guilty. You are saying it because of nerves. Innocent people guess. Tired people mix up details. Scared people try to sound helpful and sound suspicious. Burghoos versus Tompkins matters here. The Supreme Court said the right to remain silent has to be invoked clearly. In simple English, staying quiet alone may not be enough. If you joke or explain, those words can be used. So don't hint at silence. State it. "I'm invoking my right to remain silent." That sentence tells the camera where you stood. Bad way. Most drivers say, I was only at my cousin's house for like 5 minutes. Then their own words become the evidence. Good way. Smart drivers say, "Officer, I'm invoking my right to remain silent." Then they stop feeding the officer details that can be twisted later. This part is huge. Officers often ask questions that sound casual, but are really evidence collectors. "Where are you coming from?" "Why are you nervous?" "Whose bag is that?" "Why did you take so long to pull over?" Every answer creates a problem. If your story is off by one detail later, they call it deception. If you admit locations, they build suspicion. If you try to be funny, they call it evasive. Your mouth becomes the tool they use on you. And no, remaining silent does not mean refusing basic legal duties. You still identify yourself as required by law. You still hand over documents during a lawful stop. You still follow safe commands. But beyond that, you do not become a witness against yourself. This comes straight from Supreme Court rulings. It is especially important after the officer starts moving away from the traffic issue and into criminal questions. Let me show you exactly how this sounds. The officer says, "You got anything illegal in the car?" You say, "Officer, I am invoking my right to remain silent." The officer says, "If you're innocent, why not answer?" You say, "I'm invoking my right to remain silent." The officer says, "So you do have something to hide?" You repeat the line, calm, same words, same tone, no debate. That is how you stop a spiral before it starts. Most people think talking proves innocence. It doesn't. It just creates material, and you can't pull words back in. 90% of drivers don't know what's coming next. If you're still here, you're already ahead. Drop a comment saying "I'm still here," because the next tactic is where people ruin everything by arguing. The fourth tactic is how to comply without surrendering your rights when the officer tells you to step out. Here's exactly what you say. "Officer, I will comply. I do not consent to any searches. In Pennsylvania versus Mims, the Supreme Court said officers can order a driver out of the car. You do not win that fight on the roadside. If the officer says, step out, you step out. Slowly, hands visible, no sudden moves, no reaching back into the car. Your argument comes later, not next to the highway. Bad way. Most drivers say, no, you can't make me get out. Then tension spikes and the stop gets dangerous. Good way. Smart drivers say, officer, I will comply. I do not consent to any searches. Then they obey. You stay physically cooperative but legally protected. You are not trying to win an ego contest. If they ask to search the car after you're out, your line stays. I do not consent to any searches. Now let's tie the law together. Schneckloth means you're sure counts as consent. Say no clearly. Rodriguez means police cannot drag out a stop. Ask, am I being detained or am I free to leave? Mims means the officer can order you out. Comply safely while still refusing consent. Invoke silence out loud. Now picture a real stop. The officer asks, mind if I take a look? You say, I do not consent. In the right version, you give the officer almost nothing except the traffic issue. That is the goal. Next week, I'm revealing what to say when cops claim they smell weed. Subscribe so you don't miss that trap. Lock this in. Never say, sure. Ask if you're free to leave. Invoke your right to silence. Comply safely. You just need a few clean lines ready. Hit subscribe and smash like if this gave you a plan. Stay safe.